You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. We're taking this week and we're filming some B-roll, as they call it in the industry. Around the station. You'll be seeing it air on WBAY down the road. And they asked me, they're like, "Hey Ben, can you think you can do some of this B-roll shooting today so that you're in it?" I'm like, guys, I'm sure there were emails about this that I chose to ignore over the last couple of days. But I'm sitting here, and if you're watching the stream, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or TikTok, I'm in a Green Lantern t-shirt. Still haven't gotten a haircut. The hair is just disheveled as heck at this point. Definitely going to have to do that. And I am just not in a position to be filmed and saved for years in the way I look today. And I was like, I'm going to need at least one more day to mentally prepare for this. So tomorrow, you're going to see me looking a bit classier than I normally look. So you're welcome for that in advance. But I wish I actually just read my emails sometimes. It's a shortcoming that I possess. I can admit that. It's nobody else's fault. It's no one else's fault, but I'm just saying I wish I could read this stuff ahead of time because I have dropped the ball on this one, that is for sure. Lots to jump into here, but I want to start. We have Wisconsin-based stories, specifically stories about what our neighbors to the west are doing, and a couple of lessons that I think we could learn from that. I kicked a MAGA hornet's nest yesterday on Twitter, which was super fun. Got called a bunch of slurs that have nothing to do with who I am. Which goes to show you that racism isn't necessarily the most intellectual of the types of isms that are out there. But and I do want to jump into all of that, but I want to start with Sharon Simmons, aka the DoorDash grandmother, because I want to talk about this in a way that I don't think anybody else is going to talk about it, because I think it's important to highlight this here. If you guys don't know who the DoorDash grandma is, allow me to fill you in. She is the woman that was used essentially as a political prop, and that's not new. That's not Trumpian. That's everybody does it. That is not where I want to aim this. Although I do have a video on my Facebook as we speak that highlights that this woman is kind of paraded around anytime they need an older woman to talk about how excited she is that billionaires are getting massive tax cuts. She was in Arizona right after the passage of the billionaire kiss-ass bill, and obviously she was up in D.C. yesterday dropping off some McDonald's. It felt like it was an ad for McDonald's and DoorDash, if I'm being perfectly honest. But that's not the angle in which I wanted to discuss what took place outside of the White House yesterday. No, what I wanted to highlight here is how this story emphasizes several systemic failures in America, and the way the media and politicians are talking about it goes to highlight exactly how we gloss over those shortcomings in the name of partisan politics and scoring political points, both in favor of or against our political party of choosing. I could not find an age on Sharon Simmons, but it seems to be that it is common knowledge that she is beyond retirement age. She shouldn't have to work anymore. In a country where we have so much wealth, where up until the fourth quarter, the GDP had been doing so well, where the stock market was shooting through the roof, it would stand to reason that a woman like Sharon, who often talks about her work ethic and talks about her interest in America and the job market and how she's just trying to get by, bootstrapping, very pro MAGA person, right? Although I would like to emphasize he tried to set her up for a something trans, and it didn't work, which was without a doubt the best part of the press conference. When he was like, "What do you think about trans people in sports?" She's like, "I don't have an opinion on that. Please don't drag me into your culture war to distract from your failing economy." But he tried his best. It didn't work. That's fine. Waka waka MAGA. In any event, she has a husband that has stage 3 cancer. I Googled it. According to this most recent public stint she did, she said she lives in Arkansas. Now, I don't know where she actually lives, but let's just take her at her word there, because there's no way for me to know for sure where she actually comes from, because she has been paraded about in a as a prop. Anna telling me she's 58, not retirement age. Okay, well, that definitely helps out a little bit. Thank you very much. The grandma thing throws me off here, but in this country, I guess I shouldn't be that caught off guard by a 58-year-old grandmother. But in any event, her husband has stage 3 cancer, and I looked it up. What's the annual cost without insurance? What's the yearly cost of the cover of the treatment for stage 3 cancer? And the answer that I came up with was anywhere between $100,000 and $300,000 dollars per year. She was going to thank President Trump for an $11,000 write-off as a result of her tips. Now, there's a lot that I could question about that $11,000. We can only it's only a matter of writing off the cash tips there, which I think is worth highlighting because I'd argue a lot of us probably received the cash tips. I'm seeing a little bit of back and forth about whether or not it works the same way for 1099 employees as W-2 employees, and I really couldn't get any kind of confirmation about that, so I'm going to refrain from spreading any kind of misinformation on that front. But the idea that there's $11,000 in tips that she had been reporting, and now she gets to write it off, I find to be a bit of a stretch. But for the purposes of this fairy tale, let's allow that to be the case. She is going to thank Donald Trump for the $11,000 write-off that she gets for no tax on tips, according to her, while owing, as per the research that I did before going on the air, between $100,000 and $300,000 for stage 3 cancer treatments. Now, I would argue that this seems like a pretty solid PSA almost immediately for this is why tax cuts are useless. We should just be doing Medicare for all, because she finds herself at a minus $89,000 a year compared to what she is saving in taxes, according to her, for the one big beautiful bill versus what she would owe minimally for her husband's treatments. Somebody in my TikTok chat just said I sound like the British version of James Bond. He loves my accent. I feel like James Bond is British. I'm so thrown off by that, I lost my train of thought, but I appreciate the compliment nevertheless. Anyway, $89,000 difference between what she owes and what she is saving here. And as a result of her taking this McDonald's to Donald Trump, a man who has enriched himself to the tune of billions of dollars just in the last 16 months of being president. But don't worry, he isn't collecting a paycheck. He has enriched himself by billions of dollars, gave her $100 tip, and said something to the effect of, make sure or use this money to help your husband get his cancer treatments. In every other industrialized country, this woman would not be needing to pick up side hustles and extra gigs to pay for her 6 figures worth of treatments to make sure that her husband is able to stay as healthy as possible while going through this. That story, to me, highlights so many failures within the economic system that we currently find ourselves intertwined in today. Never mind the fact that I question the validity of her story entirely, and she is seeming more and more like one of those paid actors that we hear Republicans always accuse liberals of using so often. But what I do know is this: no other country that is industrialized would have this woman fighting for dear life to make sure that her husband gets the treatments that he needs. It would just be given to him. And we are acting like this is some kind of success story. That the fact that this woman is able to save an extra, or write off, not save. She's not making an extra $11,000. She is writing off $11,000 for the purposes of her taxes. That is not saving $11,000. I think that's appropriate for me to say it that way here. But We're supposed to champion that story as a testament to how great it is to be American and how awesome the golden era of American prosperity is. And Donald Trump is ushering in this golden era of prosperity, and we should be excited about that reality. When instead, in any other nation, they're probably writing stories like 60-year-old woman has to pick up second side hustle job in order to try and make it a little bit more affordable to afford her husband's cancer treatments, which sounds dystopian in any other country except for America that has industrialized. There's third world countries that are comparable to the situation we have in America. Not too many first world ones find themselves in that situation. And yet, when you see the coverage of this, obviously right-wing media is going to talk about it like this was some kind of crowning achievement. When you watch liberal media discuss it, they talk about the validity of the tax claims, whether or not these taxes are actually going as far as she claims. I haven't seen too much in the terms of mainstream highlighting that there is video evidence of this woman being at multiple MAGA events. But what I do know is they are not talking about the failures of the system, because to be perfectly frank, she would be in the exact same boat that she's in now under Harris and was in the same boat under Biden. So highlighting that this woman exists and that her husband has 6 figures worth of medical treatments does not do them any services either. This story went viral yesterday. It was picked up by every news source. It was covered. Hell, I made a couple of joke videos about it because, as I often tell you guys, I just can't help myself. But the fact of the matter is this was a depressing story. This is a story that it could impact everybody listening to me, including me. For all I know, it has impacted some of you listening to me, and it feels like your story is falling on deaf ears. And I cannot stress enough, at least on this program, that that is not the case. But it's such a sad situation that we are living in, and it's not bringing any attention to what we need to be focusing on. There are mainline Democrats right now running on tax cuts. Now, they are saying that those tax cuts are going to be just for the working class, but if it doesn't come with tax increases for the highest earners, then all we're doing is going to continue underfunding social programs that get much more bang for their buck than any kind of extra couple $1,000s might get you in the untimely or the unfortunate incident where you find yourself needing 6 figures to pay for whatever ailment you have just been diagnosed with. It could happen to me later today. This is the way that people need to be thinking, and this is the way that so many other nations are already thinking, and this is supposed to be championed as good news. This is supposed to be viewed as a win in the eyes of a certain political party that this woman is able to make a couple extra $100, maybe $1,000 as a result of this tax cut, while any social programs that might have assisted this woman go to the wayside. Sad, sad reality, and around we go. All right. With that, we got a ton of texts, ton of messages piling up. Let's start there. Okay. Phil in Oshkosh says 11 grand in tips my booty, LOL, and as a grandma, shouldn't she be retired? I will say, I drove not full time for ride shares when I was a producer back in Pittsburgh, because the pay was so menial, despite the fact you needed a college degree for the job. I'd wake up around 5:30 in the morning. I'd do DoorDash for about 3.5 hours, Monday through Friday, maybe an all-day stint on either Saturday or Sunday, 15 to 20 hours a week, roughly. Just to supplement, and I'll say $11,000 isn't that out of the ordinary. Again, you're a 1099 employee, so that's gross. That doesn't count wear and tear on the car. That doesn't count the cost of gasoline, which obviously has only gone up over the course of the last 45 days. It doesn't account for any of that. But I'd argue $11,000 is absolutely achievable in terms of tips over the course of a year, assuming you're on point. I never made people wait. The only reason people waited when I was driving was because I got to the restaurant too quickly and the food wasn't ready. That was the only time I ended up waiting. Anyone who did DoorDash or Grubhub or any of the food ones during COVID knows that between the understaffing and all the other jazz that went into the conversation there. Oh God, it was miserable. I don't miss that time period of my life whatsoever. Anna just simply says, "America." Yeah, I'm right there. Grandma of 10. Congratulations to Sharon Simmons on all of her success. Um, Ben says, "Stop saying MAGA since the GOP abandoned the America First agenda. Should be Waka Waka traders." Hey, I'm right there with you, man. You're experiencing the Ben Commono's life of 2022. Ben, is what you're experiencing right now. I watched Democrats win the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and do nothing to address a cost of living crisis that sucked, not nearly as bad as it does now, but that sucked, and kind of watched them pretend like it didn't matter. Um, oh, it's a conspiracy. Aren't you happy Donald Trump's not president? Do you remember January 6th? You're experiencing that right now, only instead of January 6th, it's immigrants in the transgender community that they dangle in front of your base's eyes and sees how many of them are willing to go along for the ride. Do you remember when I used to mock people that would send me diatribes about the Trump trials and how he was obviously guilty and we were going to nail him to the wall? And then I'd be like, yeah, I'm sure that nothing has happened in 3 years, but any moment now. You're experiencing the inverse of that right now. There's a growing resentment to the two-party system. And what's funny is part of the Democrats in Wisconsin have actually asked me to speak in an event soon, and I'm going to be saying the same thing. There's an appetite for a change from the status quo. But the question is, are people willing to actually meet people where they are? After, I'm digressing. I promised Gene and Jerry I will read your text. But after the Democrats lost in 2024, they said, we need a left-wing Joe Rogan. We need somebody who can speak to men in America. They can reach across the aisle and talk common sense. And then anytime a leftist shows up and actually means business and is pointing out the faults of not just the Republicans, but also the Democratic Party, including taking funds from AIPAC and maintaining a status quo that is not acceptable, they're like, okay, this guy's obviously anti-Semitic. We need a new guy because this isn't what we actually had in mind. We just want somebody that can speak to men in America, but not actually expect us to change in any kind of meaningful way. Well, unfortunately, the reason men in America don't want to listen to you is because you're not changing in any meaningful way. What Ben is going through right now is the inverse of that. MAGA tried to speak to men in this country and some women, but mostly men in this country, and promised them the world. This world has left you behind. You're not going to be able to afford the basics to start a life. And if you don't vote for us, it's only going to get more expensive. Only to turn around and say, yeah, there's nothing we can do about the expensive things. The swingiest voters in America today are Gen Z because they need the most economic help right now, which, right on, I get it. They swung mildly towards Donald Trump and have viciously swung away because they are not seeing anything get done. Don't get me wrong. They've got a problem with instant gratification as well that they, as a generation, are going to need to figure out how to handle. But that also comes with age. But we need people that mean business in positions of power. As I keep stating, there will be a reckoning electorally in November, and in all likelihood, barring some kind of massive shift, in 2028 as well. Democrats will maintain power again, and it's going to be a matter of, do you deliver, or do you give people a bunch of reasons why you can't deliver? And as long as they are trying to deliver, I will be the loudest voice telling people that Republicans are blocking it. I was doing it during the Biden administration. Republicans blocked price negotiations on drugs. They blocked any kind of measures to prevent price gouging in the oil and gas industry. They prevented a lot of the positive movement that would address the needs of the people that they are now showing no interest in addressing themselves. We're going to need a party that is willing to say, not only is what the Republicans doing trash, but what the Republicans inherited was not trending in the right direction and wasn't helping a meaningful number of people. It's as simple as that. Gene says, maybe I missed something, but can you explain to me why she would owe $100,000 for cancer treatment? I went through extensive treatment with our insurance we bought ourselves, and we didn't pay close to that amount, maybe 5,000 tops. This was based on my own research without insurance, because again, I have no idea what her husband did. I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that DoorDash does not come with insurance. So anybody who's a 1099 employee, unless you're paying for it yourself, you don't have insurance. And depending on how far along his stage 3 cancer is, that would determine whether or not he was able to continue working. I have no idea what the specifics are in the situation that they were in, but I'm saying that that is a plausible situation in America that you can find yourself in. And moreover, it is we are the only industrialized country where the potential for that outcome exists. Anywhere else, it's just, oh, you got stage 3 cancer, here's your health care. That's just me, of course. Jerry says, your arithmetic is way off. She only saves the taxes on the $11,000, and she's probably in a very low tax bracket. Elon Musk's net worth increases by $11,000 in about 10 seconds, and I'm not joking. Oh, yeah, there's plenty of other metrics that go into this conversation. How much money do you actually make in a yearly basis? And if you make below a certain amount, then you probably weren't going to be taxed on it anyway. There's a ton of different variables in this conversation that I think need to be taken into account. But the fact is, championing somebody going to work to pay for their loved ones' cancer treatments, the bootstrap American gumption that Cat Girl seems to love so much in my TikTok, really isn't a thing in any other country, and you don't see anybody else complaining. Here's some fun food for thought for everybody, including Cat Girl. Show me a country that switched to nationalized healthcare where the citizens are screaming, let's switch back to private. Waka waka, MAGA. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, good morning, Ben.
What's up, man?
You know, a couple things. One thing I've noticed being in rideshare and gig work is a lot of people that do it are in their 60s, 70s, and some even in their 80s that are doing Uber, like pickups.
Sure.
I know a guy who's 86 years old and drives Uber. So there's that. And then as far as health insurance goes, like Instacart and Uber offer health insurance, but if, let's say you get cancer, right? You need all these levels of treatment. You got to go to chemo, radiation. You're sick, all the things. Well, if you don't, there's different tiers. As I don't know if you're aware of this, but like to be like an Uber Diamond, you have to complete, so many rides.
Oh, I remember. Yeah. Yeah. I was Uber Gold. I was like, get out of town. All right, go on.
All right. So if you don't maintain that certain level of, or that certain tier, you lose your insurance. So how are you supposed to keep your tier at a top level when if you get diagnosed with a major illness where it's going to, require you to be off of work significantly, or at least enough to where you're not going to be able to maintain that tier status.
I think that's you provided some insight there that I think a lot of people listening were unaware of, that I honestly had blocked out of my mind, but you're exactly right with your assessment on the matter there. And again, it's a catch-22. I'm a firm believer, Ben, that the entire conversation about health insurance, run-amok student loans, and a number of other factors in this country are designed to keep people doing Uber, to make sure that you're putting in 70 hours a week to keep that diamond tier or gold tier or whichever one brings the health care. I think it's designed to almost keep you on that treadmill in that way, and I think you're exactly right. And it's one health ailment away.
Go ahead. They also have one where they'll pay for your schooling, but then if you lose that tier status because you're going to school, then you lose the schooling benefit, so they'll no longer pay for the school.
Exactly. That's good. Now all of a sudden you've picked up a debt that you have no capacity.
So now you're in debt because you're halfway through a semester, and you're not driving as much because you got school and you got homework and tests and all that stuff, and time committed elsewhere towards school. it's it's smoke and mirrors. It looks good and it sounds attractive, but when you get into that line of work per se, uh, it's just a joke.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing your experience, man. Thanks for calling. People in the TikTok chat also, Naive Gamer talking about making his way to one of the higher ranks of rideshare drivers as well, and it kills his Honda Pilot. Exactly. This is the kind of thing that goes on. I see plenty of people hitting up the ride shares in my YouTube chat as well. I'm going to read through that during the commercial break and pull out a couple of gems here. But this is what people are facing. And I wrap up the conversation with this. And this is my own shared experience that I've shared with you guys before, but I'll do it one more time here for you. Well, probably not one more time. Let's be real. I'll reiterate it again as time goes on. But regular listeners know I lost my mom to breast cancer back in 2010. She was from diagnosis to the time she died. She racked up $220,000 in medical debts in just about 15 or 16 months. She worked for the government at the time, and we found ourselves not even on the hook for $2,000. The insurance that we had back in the 09 2010 era no longer even exists for government employees anymore. Talk to someone. And like I've told the story before, but even though my dad could afford to keep paying for the health insurance, once she passed, we were allowed to keep it for a little bit because that's the rules. But after a certain time period went by, we were not even allowed to have that. So I say all of that to say, I we should not be championing the story of the DoorDash grandma. It's great if that's what she wants to do. I'll do this job until I die. If you want to work until you're dead, more power to you. If you're doing it because you have to, because we live in the only industrialized nation in the world where that's the case, where people over the age of 80 are re entering the workforce at a record pace, to Ben's point, a record pace, 4.6% since 2020 of people over the age of 80 working in order to keep up with the cost of living that continues to go up as their fixed incomes do not reflect those increases. How can we increase social security spending? How would we be able to fight 12 wars at the same time? Simple mathematics, simple reality facing people. I'm going to go to break. I'm going to read my YouTube chat here really quick, see who else we have waiting for us, and we'll keep this conversation rolling on the other side. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. Listen, Wisconsin, we're not warm yet, but melting days and freezing nights mean water is on the move and your sump pump is about to get busy. Water damage is one of the top reasons homeowners file insurance claims, so do yourself a favor and avoid the headache altogether. Test your sump pump today by calling or texting Tim Roush and his team. Just use the free text line I've been telling you about. They can help keep your basement dry and protected. Head to timroushplumbing.com for that text line and more info. That's Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. Clean and Sober Nation out in California talking about her friend who does social work and then has to do DoorDashes on the weekends to get by. I've said it before, in an America where we weren't beholden to making infinity dollars just to make the basics work in a nation, I'm probably still working with children with special needs. You know what I mean? I'm probably still living that life because it was the most substantiated I've ever felt from a professional level outside of this job. Of course, the only reason I even switched over to software sales is because if you work with children with special needs, you know exactly what the pay is like, and making ends meet, at least with that as your primary source of income, is damn near impossible. And what it does is, not to toot my own horn, but I'd argue I was pretty good with those kids. I'm sure there were plenty of other people that are good at it, but there's also a lot of people that are not very good with it. And the people who end up staying are the people that really don't see an avenue emerging that could pay them more. Like, you basically are only encouraging the people that can't make more than that somewhere else to stay. And I'd argue it's some of the most important work that can be done, including social work, including a number of other factors as well. We're a nation that prioritizes finance, right? We're a nation that prioritizes the military industrial complex. That's the way that we focus. And it's disappointing because it clearly is backwards, in my opinion. And it discourages people from wanting to take part in a system. That's just me, of course, to prop up the people that need it most. It discourages those kind of people from taking part in the workforce. I do want to shift gears here a little bit, and I appreciate all of the back and forth. Tons of people in the, like, I have a couple of different chats going all over the place now, and they all have different attitudes towards rideshare driving. And I'm right there with you. I was a rideshare driver from 19 to 22, including in the throes of COVID. I had a guy, very angry guy, when I asked him to wear a mask. I have a dad who's immunocompromised. I was like, hey, man, you think you can wear a mask when you're in my car? And he gets out of the car and angrily starts kicking the side mirrors off of my car. And that's when I decided that I was going to stop driving people and stuck strictly with food. A little bit of a pay reduction, but at the same time, I didn't need to worry about that. Then you go to all these restaurants that are ghost towns where it's one cook taking the orders, making the orders, and bringing the orders out, and you end up waiting for an hour and 15 minutes, and then you don't get a tip when you bring the food back because they're mad about how long it took you. Meanwhile, you were sitting at that restaurant for an hour not getting paid, trying to make supplemental income because your 40-hour-a-week job is not paying you enough to meet your basic needs. It's almost like it's a system rigged against you that I lived firsthand, managed to get out of, and trying to impress that upon people. And a handful of people really struggle grasping the realities that face Americans today. As Larry says on the YouTube line, social workers need a union. I couldn't agree more. You know who else needs a union is rideshare drivers. Waka Waka. That's where I come down on that one at the very least. But I say all that to say, what are you saying, Lenny? My reaction to what you speak of insurance and what makes the government communist. Lenny, I swear to God, man, half the time I have no idea what you're trying to tell me, but I appreciate you taking part in the conversation nevertheless. All right, we're gonna put a pin in that conversation for now, but we'll start here. This will probably carry over into the 10 o'clock hour, but I at least want to touch on this momentarily because it's a conversation coming to an end. And I need to clear the air because I feel like some of you guys don't get when I'm doing dry sarcasm on social media, so I'm going to need to lay it out there for you. I created a video yesterday where I condemned Barack Obama for making an AI picture of himself as Jesus healing George Floyd while surrounded by a nurse and a handful of other people. I did not create that AI image, by the way. I would never use AI to create something. I would go without doing anything before I would use AI. I credited the source. I don't remember where it was coming from now, but in the post, I did credit the source. And I did a video along with the AI picture of Obama where Obama said he looked like a doctor. He thought he looked like a doctor, and that's why he posted it. And then I called for Obama to be removed from the office. And I feel like some people who saw the video may have been confused and not understood that I was taking an obvious and direct shot at Donald Trump. in doing so by doing the well-traveled, if Obama did this, people would be much more angry. And that was kind of the way that I was kind of portraying matters here, and it seems like it fell on deaf ears for some people involved. All of that being said, Donald Trump did end up taking that picture down, not apologizing, because why would he apologize? He never does. But taking it down and trying to pass it off like he thought he looked like a doctor, a very Christ-like doctor, is apparently the way that he thought he looked in that image. Now, he's claiming that he took it down because it was confusing. JD Vance is saying, oh, yeah, he didn't think he looked like a doctor. He just got that sense of humor, and some people don't understand the sense of humor. For the record, I do understand the sense of humor, and I don't think he needed to take it down. I think you're allowed to do whatever you want. I am not, and like, yeah, Ben, the president should be held to a different standard. No, you won't hear me. And for the record, any Democratic president that pulls some kind of garbage like this will absolutely not catch my ire either. I don't care. Humor is about taking chances. Sometimes you look like a fool. Sometimes it's very funny. It's just a matter of what you want to, how you want to make it work, right? The reason he took it down isn't because people like me complained. The reason he took it down is because people that like him complain. Catholics are moving further right every single year and are one of the largest growing right-wing demographics that are out there. Ticking them off is not a particularly intelligent move, at least politically. I think that should go without saying. Unfortunately, our big-brained president sometimes does and says stupid things. I want to now read you a compilation of comments that are available underneath Donald Trump's Truth social post. I'm not going to read all of them, but I'm just going to give you an excerpt of a couple of them to let you know exactly what people are dealing with. In all caps, you are mocking Jesus. New one. I deeply regret voting for you. Many people do. Your ego won't let you see it, or are you truly a sociopath? 25th Amendment. Mr. President, with all due respect, take this down. You are not Jesus. Even if that wasn't the intention, this is not a good look. I do not support this, and I know many others that don't either. Remove it at once. You've probably already done too much damage with this meme. Give all honor, glory, and praise to Jesus. I notice no one is saying anything about Allah here, which is strange. You are sick. I've never regretted a vote more. Idolatry, pride, and false worship. This is absolutely terrible. You think you're God? But the truth is, you're possessed, sacrilegious, and preposterous. I voted for this. MAGA is dead, spelled D-E-D. Literal blasphemy, page 2. Literal blasphemy. Trump is depicting himself as Jesus God now. You know, who does that in Revelation? The Antichrist. That goes a little too far at real Donald Trump. Mr. President, with all due respect, I do not like this post. This was disappointing and unnecessary. I could keep going. I read just about a third of all of the comments that I have collected over the course of the last 24 hours, but I think the point's been proven here that it turns out that the masked Virgin Army murdering Americans in the middle of the street, an economy that is leaving more than 2/3 of the population behind, and starting yet another illegal war with no real intention of describing to us why that war started or meaning business about why that war started. None of that was a deal breaker, but an AI picture in a white robe apparently is enough to send people spiraling, and that is what ultimately ended up scaring the Trump administration off of this. This is now the second time they've had to delete a post, the first one of which being when they depicted the Obamas as monkeys, and even some of his more stalwart supporters had to bail on him. They were like, look, man, I'm all for a good joke, but this is just flagrantly racist, and there's no other way for me to get around that. And he ended up deleting that one, said that a staffer posted it. This is the second time that it's happening. This time he's not blaming a staffer. He's blaming the fact that he looked like a doctor. So that means the choice is yours, guys. Is the president a liar or is he stupid? It's my favorite game show that I like playing with all of you guys, and we'll take your opinions now. Liar, stupid, or both? 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. You guys tell me what you think is the most accurate interpretation of the sitting president of the United States. You know what's funny is when you're not as polarizing, I'm about to out myself here because I don't know the name of the artwork, but you know the one I'm talking about, and there's like The two people are, I think it's like Adam. Oh God, I'm just gonna out myself. I'm debating if I should even talk about it. There's like a very famous picture where two people are about to touch hands, but they don't, and like the hand is outreached, but they never actually touch, and that means something artistically that I am obviously too much of a heathen to understand what it means. In Pittsburgh, there is a picture of that, except it's Ben Roethlisberger, who is accused of a thing or two that isn't particularly flattering. Um, and you really don't hear the kind of complaints coming from that picture that you are hearing coming out of the Trump White House. And it's because of how polarizing that individual it is versus in a city that has a sports franchise. Typically, the general consensus is anything that sports franchise does is okay. I feel like in 2026, you might not have been able to get away with that. That's funny. A bunch of people are actually answering my question right now. Phil and Oshkosh says both. Ernie says both. Ben says he's most likely lying. Matt says liar. Um, Brian says, for the record, it's a copy of an AI generated image from the right wing influencer Nick Adams. Don't even get me started with Nick Adams, because that guy might be the most brilliant satirist ever, or is the most diehard moron MAGA I've ever met in my life. Because, like, he posts pictures of himself where he's like absolutely not masculine or manly, and he talks about like training people to be a real alpha. And I can't tell if he's being serious or not. That's just me, of course. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
For your question, Charlie Sykes, which was a radio host in Milwaukee,
Sure.
he said Trump is too stupid to know that he is stupid.
You know,
so
that's
I kind of fall in that camp.
That's no, I get that. And honestly, man, that to me is the definition of stupidity, because not being educated is not necessarily stupid. It's just not being educated on a matter. To me, stupidity stems from the ability of not know that you don't know what you're talking about, which, to your point, I think is probably a more accurate description of what we're dealing with right now, and definitely doesn't bode well for the future of the country. That's for sure. But I appreciate the input nevertheless.
Yes, have a good day.
You too. Bye. You guys tell me, by the way, I live stream on TikTok, and apparently something I said got me restricted for the next 10 minutes. But you guys tell me, what did I say that was just offensive right now? Because I surely have no idea. What's up, TikTok? That's how fast the censorship happens, by the way, in this country. It's not even like it's just picking up on me speaking, and it's like I can tell something happened. It wasn't a no word, but something in the collection of words you said we have decided that less people should be allowed to hear what you're saying right now. Strange. It's a strange time to be alive, I can tell you that. But so, yes, Michelangelo's mosaic from the Sistine Chapel. Yes, but what's the name? I knew it was on the top of the Sistine Chapel, but there's like a name of the artwork, and they basically recreated that artwork in Heinz Field. And no one was like, this is blasphemous. Hell, the Roonies are diehard Catholics. They were like, yes, make sure this goes up. And like, that was 20 years ago. It really wasn't that long ago that something like that happened. And now look at how everybody reacts. It's kind of wild that that's the world that we live in here. Look, if anybody has any more thoughts on that, I'd love to keep it rolling. But I do want to shift gears into the state of Wisconsin here and talk about our what our neighbors to the west are doing that I think you guys are going to find interesting. If you haven't already, download the WHBY app. Please consider subscribing to my YouTube page. And, of course, we're streaming live on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. So please subscribe to those pages if you haven't already. It definitely goes a long way to helping me out there. And we'll keep this ball rolling in the next hour here. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos right here on WHBY. I missed it by 15 seconds. I'm bad at the job. When we come back on the other side of the news, don't Minnesota my Wisconsin is a phrase used often in politics. What does it mean and should we be against it? That's coming up on the other side of the news. Oh, hey, we're back. Outside the Box. Ben Comino's WHBY, Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we talked a little bit about the PR stunt done by DoorDash outside of the White House and talk about how, in my opinion, what it actually did was highlight the shortcomings of an economic welfare system, healthcare system, whatever the situation may be, showing what this woman has to go through in order to afford her husband's astronomically priced healthcare bills. And then we pivoted from there and we were talking a little bit about the fallout from the Donald Trump Jesus picture, the one that got me restricted on TikTok for about 10 minutes. And I have to say, in fear of being restricted again on TikTok, and that's okay. I see you, baby. It's all right. It's the big brother that we're just gonna have to learn to deal with, especially if you have a career in media, I suppose. But like the reason I looked it up, the reason I got banned is because we were talking about Donald Trump's post, and I said, look, he's saying he thought the picture depicted him as a doctor. Meanwhile, he's standing there with glowing hands, healing people. Like there was very limited interpretation of what was going on in that picture. To which I asked the question, do you think he was lying or do you think he was stupid? And then somebody called in and said he actually might be so stupid that he doesn't know that he is stupid. And then I got restricted for that comment there. And I will say, and I was joking with Landon Moore about this off the air, I think anti-bullying campaigns are a net positive. All right. I don't want to get myself in hot water here for saying this. As someone that was messed with in high school, I think in the moment I would have absolutely preferred that my teachers and the adults in the room had a more thorough understanding of how bullying works, what the students are going through, and the ways that they are treated in high school. I think there is a net positive. But I can also say now, as a 38-year-old man that really doesn't get bullied anymore, that I think some of my best characteristics and traits were developed from the fact that I had to overcome a lot of those hardships in my youth. And we are now seeing people that maybe didn't get pushed around enough really struggle with a number of concepts. And there's a handful of you nodding along and agreeing with me right now. You don't need to admit it. That's fine. I know it's what's happening. Like, those liberals are too soft. Well, MAGA, I'm talking about you guys too. That's the problem, is that we're very easy to highlight when people are taking a joke that we make too seriously, when it offends something that offends their sensibilities. But then when your sensibilities are offended, well, that was actually a very serious overstep and we need to show a little bit more restraint. And I feel like that this is a compounding thing. I'm not saying we should do away with anti-bullying campaigns. So I'm saying I do think that there is an element, especially with how quickly you can have your access restricted just for making an offhand joke that I clearly had no fear of saying on FCC airwaves, but apparently the powers that be have determined that it's a bit much. And I find that strange. I find that to be a strange time to be alive. Speaking of strange time to be alive, before we move on to the next topic, I do think it would be worth highlighting that one of the higher ranking officials in Iran actually took the time to condemn Donald Trump's Jesus post. And essentially, the same way that people that practice Islam, the Muslims of the world, do not like Muhammad being shown in artwork. There's a very famous South Park episode about that where they tried to push the envelope a little bit. They apparently carry that sentiment across to all religions, and they said there should not be, according to them, a depiction of your gods, of your saviors, the same way we wouldn't want one of ours. And that's a bit of an overstep. So over the course of the last 8 days, the American president said, "Praise be to Allah," and picked a fight with the Pope and posted a picture of himself as Jesus, while the leaders in Iran are saying, hey, maybe you should cool it with some of that kind of stuff. And it's a surreal time to do this for a living, is all I have to say. These are the kind of things you notice when you do this job every single day. But I digress. Let's get into the story of the day that I want to jump into here. I kicked a bit of a hornet's nest on the Twitter. It seems like every day on one of the social media apps, I do something that garners a decent amount of attention. And it's exciting given what I'm trying to do with my life. But nevertheless, there comes with it quite a bit of hate that comes with the hornet nest kicking. This is what happened. It was announced in Minnesota, our neighbors to the west, that they officially, all Minnesotans, Minnesota parents, are now eligible to get 12 weeks paid leave after the birth of the child, both the mother and father. I then proceeded to tag a handful of conservative groups in Wisconsin that say, hey, is this what you mean when you say don't Minnesota our Wisconsin? This seems pretty all right. I understand it doesn't do anything mean to Mexicans, so you may not be on board, but just some food for thought. This might make voters like you more. Now, could I have said it nicer? Maybe. DSL's bullying me in the text line as we speak. I'm going home. But in any event, I could have said it nicer, sure. But also, I have a certain delivery of my message when I'm talking. If you guys haven't caught on yet, I feel like most people are on board with that delivery. In Wisconsin, there is a phrase, don't Minnesota my Wisconsin. That people essentially say to don't hyper blue our purple state is essentially what they are focusing on. But this story to me is a microcosm of American politics, because it's just like I mentioned in the 9 o'clock hour. Joe Biden proposes a bill that says, let's negotiate the price of all drugs, and clap along. Every single Republican in the House and Senate votes against that bill. So we get the watered down version of that bill that says, fine, let's negotiate the price of 10 drugs for people over the age of 65. And that one inevitably ends up getting pushed through. It is a 3% solution to a much larger problem that Democrats don't take seriously when they control all three levers, and that Republicans won't even talk about when they control all three levers. And this is kind of a similar situation to that story. And allow me to prove that point. Governor Evers last year put a declaration out there referencing inseminated persons instead of saying the word mothers. Those of you listening to me in Wisconsin are probably intimately familiar with that story, because the Wisconsin GOP has not shut the hell up about it since that moment. They have continued referring to people as inseminated persons, saying this is why it's important to vote for Tom Tiffany, because he won't say inseminated persons, continuing to bang the drum that liberals are strange. Now, is it strange to say inseminated persons instead of mothers? Sure. Is it something worth voting on? Only if you're voting based on something trans. To the rest of us living in the real world, it is a nothing burger. It is a thing that comes and goes. It is a thing that you hear him say, be like, man, that was a weird way to say that. And then you move on. But what Minnesota does is they turn around and they provide 12 weeks leave for the mother and father after birth. Now, if you ask me, Ben, who are you going to vote for? The party that is trying to pass 3 months leave for every new parent, mirroring what every other industrialized nation east of the Atlantic seems to have figured out to be how to be able to do. Quite frankly, I believe it's longer than 12 weeks. Would I vote for that? Or would I vote for the people that won't say inseminated person, but they will say mothers? They will say all mothers have to immediately return back to work after giving birth to their child. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, I'm probably going to go with the former. I'm probably going to go with the people that say mothers, fathers, and inseminated persons do not have to return to work for 12 weeks after they give birth. That's going to be the side that I agree with. And after posting this, the reaction that I got was obscene. As I kind of teased at the beginning of the 9 o'clock hour, I had one person leave a post where they called me an anti-white Jew and then also called me the N-word. And just to be clear, I'm not offended by being called black or Jewish, but I am Greek. Like, I'm neither one of those things. I'm Greek. Could have called me the G word, you know, which I'm allowed to say. That's like our N-word, but I'm not going to say it because it'll probably get me restricted for 10 minutes. But But no, he didn't do that. He proceeded to resort to racism. One guy said the father doesn't need 12 weeks off. That's just ridiculous. To which I responded, whoever knows this guy's dad, please tell him that his son needs a hug and to be told that he is proud of him. One guy thought that he was going to catch 22 me and say, as an actual socialist, obviously trolling Minnesotans, as an actual socialist, I think this is ridiculous. I think everybody should get 12 weeks off. And I was like, yeah, that's what every other industrialized nation does. When I took 2 weeks off to go to Thailand, everybody else that was from Europe and Australia were like, you're only doing 2 weeks. And then I come back and the boomers in America say, oh, well, some of us don't get to take a whole 2 weeks off because we're brainwashed. But so he says, I think everybody in Minnesota should get 12 weeks off a year, not just new parents. I was like, yeah, who's working on that bill? Tell me who's voting for that. And that's the people that I'm going to vote for. Are you kidding me? Didn't expect that answer, got a very angry response. The number of people trying to push back against this, calling him Tampon Tim, talking about the Somalis, talking about anything else other than the points that I was trying to drive home here is actually embarrassing. It's some of the most traffic that I have generated on Twitter, simply saying that if the people saying don't Minnesota or Wisconsin are talking about a guaranteed 12 weeks paid leave for every working person in Wisconsin or in Minnesota, that would be a winning platform. You wouldn't have to fearmonger about Mexicans and transgender people all the time. You could just say, we're the party that says that we are for basic family values and we think families should be allowed to be started together and you shouldn't be required to go to work right away. Which, not to get too into the weeds here, I had a very in-depth conversation with a handful of ladies that I work with here at Woodward back when I first started, where they gave me like an in-depth understanding of what happens to a woman after the birth giving process. Like I was thinking about this from just like a human standpoint. Like, yeah, parents should be with their kids after they're born. That's a pretty standard thing that I think a lot of people believe. And then one of my coworkers, who shall remain nameless, then proceeds to explain to me what goes on inside a woman after the fact. And I was like, oh my. And we make people, like, we don't guarantee. At Woodward, we're a good company here. Like, that's allowed in Woodward. I am saying that most other nations, it's just in their version of the laws. Like, it's not up to the good-natured wishes of a company. It's just what happens for people. Whereas here, depending on the company, if you haven't seen, somebody died at an Amazon warehouse, and when someone went to go tend to him, they were told to go back to work. It was a manager's duty to deal with that person. Just highlighting exactly how much the moment you can no longer generate profit for a company, you are absolutely useless, including when you end up dying on the warehouse floor. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Enjoy the next yacht. I wouldn't expect a reasonable maternity or paternity leave coming from companies where that is the standard operating procedure. In Minnesota, it no longer is. In Minnesota, the new rules are 12 weeks off statewide, regardless of what your company wants to say. Someone says, who do you think pays for that? To which I said, the same people paying to blow up schools in Iran. And if those are my two choices, I choose to pay for maternity and paternity leave. People think they're going to catch you in a catch-22 for doing the objectively right thing. Meanwhile, I'm willing to bet that the same people that are condemning this action, the same people that are trying to catch me in a lie, the same people that are trying to highlight that I don't know what I'm talking about, are the same people that want to make sure that women are forced to give birth to babies that they don't want to give birth to. Thanks a lot, B. I appreciate that. But he just says, I can't say what he said because I'll get censored, but he really enjoys the show. I'm back at you. Glad you're here. Glad everyone's here through all these different streaming services. But I say all that to say, this is basic common sense stuff here. This is basic common sense stuff that will win elections. And instead, Republicans are just wired. Like, why do you guys hate this idea so much? Is it because you didn't get it? Picture the Emancipation Proclamation. And we're like, yeah, okay, our bad. White people went a bit too far and slavery was a bridge too far. We're going to roll it back. Turns out you guys now count as 3/5 of a person. Congratulations on your success. And all of the black people that were slaves that were like 70 years old were like, well, wait a minute. I lived my entire life as a slave, and now you're telling me that the people that are 17 get to live a free life? This is ridiculous. I'm voting against this. I'm sure that sentiment existed to a certain extent, but like, I'd love to know the psychological backing of how people are wired that way. Why wouldn't we want our tax dollars dedicated to making sure that mothers are able to heal, and that for the first 3 months of a newborn's life, their father is in their life? That shouldn't be an astronomical ask, and it shouldn't be viewed as weakness or welfare or some kind of government overreach. That should be the basics. That should be the basics of what is allowed in this society. Don't Minnesota my Wisconsin, is what they say. I'll tell you what, Minnesota the hell out of my Wisconsin, because you can sign me up for that every single day of the week and twice on Sundays. And I'm not even intending to have a child. I just know what will be better for society and what is a better use of our money other than giving it all to Elon Musk and blowing stuff up. Anna says maternity leave in Europe averages around 21 to 23 weeks, with many countries offering substantially more, far exceeding the EU minimum standard of 14 weeks. And you mean to tell me that their country isn't on the cusp of economic ruin? You mean to tell me that they don't sit around saying no one wants to work anymore? Is that really how that works over there? You're kidding. Jeremani says she left TikTok right after Trump took over. Well, I will tell you, I don't know what it was like beforehand, but I can tell you they definitely try to rein in your speech there, that's for sure. And she went on to say Amazon pays for trans surgeries for adults. Settle down, GOP. At least that is what a parent of a trans adult tells me. Well, I mean, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. He's still an evil billionaire, but they do like to do the virtue signaling, right? If there's something that they can do that isn't a huge cost that can make it look like they're the good guys in a storyline, they will absolutely take it upon themselves to try and do so. But it's definitely interesting nevertheless. Let's see here. I got a couple of texts coming through here. And Anna says, if you keep talking maternity leave, I will kick down that studio door. Yeah, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. There's plenty of people that agree with it as well. And again, I'm not a parent. I have no dog in the fight. I wish I spent as much time using the platform I have advocating for stuff that will directly benefit me. But like, I very rarely do so. I paid off my student loans, yet I believe that if you're listening to me drowning in student debt, that shouldn't be the case, and it is definitely hindering your progression as a human, and it doesn't need to be that way, as every other country has seemed to figure it out. I believe that parents should be involved in their kids' lives to the much of the ability that we are able to do so, and it really isn't that much of an ask to be able to do it. All we have to do is not increase the defense budget to 1.5 trillion. Never forget, that is on the docket later this year. A $500 billion increase from the most recent defense budget that is already $200 billion more expensive than it is. We have found roughly $2 billion a day to blow up civilian infrastructure all across Iran, and nobody is questioning where that money came from. Nobody is questioning if we can afford to do it, and they are looking to increase our defense spending in 2 years close to double what it was. But they want to tell you that 12 weeks off for maternity and paternity leave is a pipe dream. Affordable child care, elder care, and secondary education is a pipe dream. They want to tell you there's no money to make sure that Social Security stays insolvent, but they can find $500 billion at the drop of a hat to do a war that nobody can explain why we're doing it. Somebody explain to me, A, how they think they can get away with that, and B, why some of you actually support that. I thought this was America first, damn it. This is nothing about America first in this agenda. Outside the box is infinitely more America first than Donald Trump could ever hope to be. I'm just America first in a way that helps everybody making less than 7 figures a year, and apparently that is frowned upon in this nation, unfortunately. And with that, I have to get out of here. We have to go to break. We're going to come back. We'll keep the conversation rolling. Does anybody have any experiences with maternity, paternity leave, or lack thereof? I would love to hear about what you have to say. As Chris hits me right as I'm going to break, in the year 2000, military spending was 300 billion. Exactly. Exactly. There's actually, I'll play that when we come back. There's audio that I have for you that's kind of comical, but to any millennials in the audience, it might make you want to cry. We'll jump into that on the other side. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. Congratulations on your success, Jarmani. None of us believe that meeting was real, of course. She's in the YouTube chat, said she had to leave at 10:30 for a meeting. Now she says it got moved. I'm beginning to think it was a farce. I think the tease was so good leading into the commercial break. She was like, oh, well, son of a gun. I guess I'm going to stick around for this now. Judy hopped on the text line and says, my niece is one of the lucky ones to be able to have the 12 weeks off in Minnesota paid. She recently returned to work and now her husband is able to stay with the baby. It's such a blessing. I'm always so sad how many people think it's not important to be home with your baby. Truthfully, it's not enough time, but it's better than most American people will get. Seems to be the trend that a lot of people would agree with on that one. And I'm, as someone who hasn't experienced it firsthand, I find myself in agreement with that as well. And Jacqueline says, oh, and my then husband was never helpful with the kids. He would have used his time off as a vacation instead. He was more like a glorified roommate. Well, it's an unfortunate reality that a lot of people are faced with, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I know there's plenty of dudes in my life, and I think it is generational in your era, Jacqueline, and I'm not assuming. I only know because you've shared parts of your personal life with me, but it's become viewed as less of a woman's work as time has gone on. It's the reason why millennials are the best generation. No bias at all. And to that effect, I do want to play this clip because I thought it was hilarious. It's an animated clip that was doing the rounds on social media talking about the millennial experience. And to anybody who's roughly my age, you know exactly, like I am 2 years removed. I am just short of what they're talking about on in this message here. And I think you would enjoy hearing it. So let me play this for you, and then we'll laugh about it on the other side, and then we'll get to why it's relevant pertaining to what I want to talk to you about this segment. But listen to this. This is a millennial talking about his excitement after a pretty okay childhood.
Wow, childhood was great. I'm excited for a bright future.
9/11.
What?
Yeah, it's 9/11. It's going to be the worst terrorist attack in human history, and the world's never going to be the same.
All right, well, I'm sure by the time I get to college, things will...
Financial crisis. There's going to be one of the worst financial crises ever.
All right, well, whatever. I'm sure by the time I'm 30...
Global pandemic. There's going to be a global pandemic that irreparably shifts how society operates forever.
This is becoming too much for me. All right, well, I was always shown that the key to happiness is just raising a family and owning a home. So I'm just going to focus on that because I'm finally making $100,000 a year.
$250,000.
Huh?
Yeah, you're going to need $250,000 a year for all those things now.
Are you kidding me? Gee, I mean, I guess I'll just go back to medical school then.
$300,000, that's going to cost $300,000 and also 10 years of your life.
Oh, my... Whatever. I'll just pursue my passions and become an artist.
They're going to try to replace you with AI.
Good God. I can't deal with this anymore. I'm just going to revert back to my childhood and watch some of my favorite shows. Try to forget about this.
Child abuse.
What?
Yeah, child abuse. They were all abusing children.
Ugh. I need to go back to church.
Also abusing children.
I can't do this anymore. Is the government at least like trying to fix this? Abusing children?
Abusing children, yeah.
Yeah, that sums up basically my experience from age 13 until today. And I wonder if anybody else can kind of relate to that as well. Crazy time to be alive. And while that's more existential, that's more world events kind of highlighted in a linear fashion for people, that apparently it's the avocado toast that is preventing them from being able to start their life. Allow me to play one more that maybe hits a little closer to home. This is just a random guy at the grocery store. He's going to tell you what he buys. If I tell you what he bought, then it's just going to be redundant for me to play the first part of the audio clip. But he's going viral buying a pretty simple thing at the grocery store. And wait until you hear. Maybe if you're a regular purchaser of these goods, it might be different for you. But I'm interested. How many of you guys have had a shared experience like this? Give this guy a listen.
Tonight, I'm here at the grocery store. I come to get some stuff. America's not going to be able to survive like this. How are we going to survive? I got stuff to make burger and fries, okay? I got enough meat to make 8 hamburgers, a pack of hamburger buns, a thing of charcoal, a bag of potatoes, and grease. Take a wild guess. $50 damn $50 to make homemade hamburgers and French fries? There's no way we're surviving. I make good money, and this is not sustainable. I can't spend $50, and I didn't even get nothing. This right here was on sale for $3.99, so the charcoal was only $3.99. The rest of the food, hamburger meat, buns, potatoes, and grease, $45. We are so screwed.
I mean, he kind of sums it up best there. No, it's a matter that's supposed to be the cheap answer, right? Don't go out to eat. Go get ground beef and make a hamburger patty with it and go to town from there. That's supposed to be the simple answer for somebody in their early 20s who's trying to start a life, right? I am not unsympathetic to the fact that when you're in your early 20s, it's romantic to be broke and have roommates and trying to make life work. At 24, it's very romantic. At 34, it's very frustrating. At 44, it's depressing. And that is much more indicative of what people are going through today. This is not an attack on Donald Trump. This is not an indictment on specifically Republican politics. It's half of that. It's the other half is an indictment on the other half of the political spectrum that doesn't want to address this either. The only way that this can happen is if a system is broken. It's the only way. And the system did not break overnight. It's not something that came about as a result of Donald Trump in 2024. It is not as a result of Donald Trump in 2016. This has been a very slowly moving process that we are all very aware of just how broken it is, and that, although comically delivered, very accurate statement about what the average millennial has gone through in society really highlights exactly how we ended up here and why there's still such a small number of people that are able to do what is necessary to make ends meet in society. As Ernie says, Dave Ramsey's got an answer. But what's funny is, and I know you're being sarcastic, Ernie, but what's funny is that his answer would be go buy hamburgers and live cheaply until you can afford to do more. Meanwhile, hamburgers are a $50 expense now. What is the GOP's answer to this? I have not heard one, and they control all the levers. As I mentioned, I'm going to be speaking with the Democratic Party in 2 weeks, and believe you me, I'm going to be impressing upon them that just saying cost of living crisis, affordability, oligarchy, those are good buzzwords, but without a concrete plan in order to be willing to address it and to say out loud, no, I'm going to hold the people to account who have created this situation. I am going to do something about a run-amok cost of living that is requiring the DoorDash grandmother to continue doing DoorDash at a regular basis to make sure that she can afford to pay for her husband's cancer treatments. That isn't the way that the best country in the world should be operating, especially when I have such concrete evidence that that is in fact not the way that most other countries in the world work. And I am supposed to believe that those countries are somehow worse than what we are trying to do right now. This ain't rocket science, ladies and gentlemen. It's basic economics. I am not an economist by trade, but I do know a handful of burger patties, some grease, some charcoal, and some bread is not supposed to cost $48 and change. And pretending that that is somehow normal or the fault of anybody other than a handful of corporations artificially inflating our prices is laughable. We look at it on this show all the time from the C level, right? Playing CFOs and CEOs bragging about record profits. We just talked last week about the Delta CEO saying, yeah, we had to raise prices for gasoline, and as a result, we had our best quarter ever, and we see no reason to ever bring the prices lower, even after the price of oil goes down. That can't be allowed to continue. What is Donald Trump running on or emphasizing that he is trying to do for you? What is Tom Tiffany saying that he's going to do to address that? Trying to find $4 million in fraud while he can't crack down on the 8th failed audit of the Defense Department when he had the means to do so? Call me crazy, but I don't think the guy means business. 920-281-1150. 920-281-1150. Somebody tell me what the game plan is here, because I am not seeing it. I have one more segment I want to do here. Let me just see. By the way, Jeremiah did send me a screenshot of the conversation with her boss allowing the meeting to move. You better hope she's not listening right now, you know? Wait, is that his real name? That's ridiculous. All right. So anyway, she is sticking around with us, though. We're going to finish this show off with an interesting conversation. Of course, if anybody has some thoughts, if you have your own grocery store horror stories, I just went and picked up some of the bare necessities yesterday, and as per usual, I was completely caught off guard by how much I had to pay. Naive Gamer, my text line says, I think I saw something where a company was saying maybe we did overdo the prices during COVID. That was on this show that I was talking about this, that they straight up said that they are seeing a reduction in prices because people are finally breaking. PepsiCo is like, you know what? $7 for this bag that is primarily air might be a bit of an overreach on our part, and we're noticing that people aren't buying it as much. This is one of the shortcomings that comes with a country where all of the food is essentially owned by 5 different companies masquerading as 100 different companies. And there's an easy way, well, not easy, but there is a way to solve it. It's just a matter of who means business. We'll take this call before we go to break. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Yeah, good morning, Ben. It's Gary calling. Say, I heard your spiel about the prices and that, and then I thought every day when I go to the grocery store, I remember I worked in a grocery store in high school, and milk was 69 a gallon, and hamburger was 39 cents a pound. And I remember my father would buy 3 50-pound bags of potatoes over a winter, and they would be $3.50 for 50 pounds. And I thought, oh, god darn, those are cheap. And when I looked at the price of potatoes, you can get them for $39, but mostly around $5.90, $6 for a 10-pound bag today. And then I figured it out, and it was like that $3.50 pound bag of 50s was 7 cents a pound. And I figured it up that the hamburger and the potatoes went up about 8 times since those dates. And I figure wages, the problem is the wages never kept up. It's not the price going up 8 times from what I remember back in the day. It's the fact that the wages haven't kept up to compensate for the prices. And it's not that, and I'm saying even gasoline, gas is not that expensive. Well, it is now during this Hormuz thing, but even before that, for $2.89 or $2.69 or $3 is still a good buy. A lot of it has to do with state taxes and federal taxes and so forth. I don't know so much about price gouging, but I think that the problem is in the wage sector. The gap between the executives and the worker bees is so large that it hasn't compensated in the prices. So I agree with you to some extent on price gouging, but I think it's more overall for everybody. It's the wages that people are getting is the problem.
All right. I appreciate the call, Gary. And there's probably some truth to that as well. But as a Naive Gamer on the TikTok page says, and I remember this as well, I was just at the grocery store yesterday. I used to do the thing. We were a big pop drinking family, and we would line the cart with them. We get 4 6-packs of 20 or 24 ounce bottles of pop, and that would run for you could get 4 of them for between $10 and $12 depending on the special that was going. Now one of them is about $6 and there is no special. So if you were to get four like you used to, that would be $24 as opposed to $10 or $12. Then you ask yourself, well, what is pop really? It's mostly water and corn syrup with a little bit of carbonation. And all in all, a can of pop costs roughly 17 cents, and the cost of living really doesn't go much, or the cost of the product really hasn't gone up that much. Same idea with popcorn, but I at least understand why movie theaters do it, because there's a lot of other elements pinching them on the other side. But the fact it remains that these are just a handful of items that we're talking about here that are shooting up at unreasonable levels, and we're expected to try and keep pace with this. And to Gary's point, the wages absolutely are not doing so. And on top of that, the inflation, both the perceived inflation as well as what economists will tell you is inflation, has absolutely blown out of the water any wage gains that have come about over the course of the last 6 years post COVID. I see we have some texts piling in. We'll do those on the other side of the break. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right, we're back. Outside the box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, just about to call it a program here. I'm glad everybody's here listening to us terrestrially on the WHBY app or in your cars or on TikTok or on YouTube or on Facebook or later today on Political Voices Network. All of these are valid options to do it. Just please do stick around and keep interacting with the show. It's what keeps it alive. We've got plenty more weight to jump into here. We'll go Jacqueline, Tom, Kathy, DSL. I have a funny story about the PR person at DoorDash just completely crashing out trying to defend the stint yesterday. We'll see if I have time to get into that. But looks like we're going to be pressing up against it here. Jacqueline says, yep, can't fill my shopping cart anymore for $300. I'm guesstimating today it would cost me around $1,000 for food only, which, depending on the number of people you're buying, does not seem out of the realm of possibility. Tom, on the other hand, says $50 for 8 burgers equals $6 per person. Not really that bad. Fast food equals about $15. Right, but relative to the cost, I guess, that everybody is, or the earnings that everybody has, I think is where this resonates so much. And for the record, fast food burgers were also supposed to be the cheap alternative to eating at an actual restaurant. It's how we keep moving the goalposts in order to say that it's okay for a clearly diminishing set of returns every couple of years that I think is so frustrating. And for the record, Tom, if you, when Democrats inevitably take back over and you're like, yeah, this cost of living is acceptable, that's absolutely fine. What I will not tolerate is people pretending that Joe Biden's economy was completely untenable and then trying to find ways to make it seem like, oh, $50 for 8 burgers at home really isn't that big of a deal. I think we should all be pretty excited about this. That's when I'm just like, well, all right, shut up. Like, either you're mad about it or you're not. Not saying that's you, Tom, but I'm saying that's kind of like where the line is drawn. Kathy says 60 years ago, I was required to take 6 weeks of leave before the birth of my child, then another 6 weeks after, all unpaid. I was guaranteed a job, but not necessarily my position. That sounds like America in a nutshell, Kathy. And as the best nation in the country, I'm sorry you had to put up with that. And we most certainly shouldn't be putting up with it in 2026 America. That's for damn sure. And DSL says this is not unique to America. Absolutely right. This is everywhere. Otherwise, people would be leaving and others not trying to come in. Even those that leave come back. It's a global issue thanks to the stock markets of the world. And like DSL, if you remember, I used to talk about that in the Biden era. I'd say the economy sucks under Joe Biden. And what's crazy is the inflation rate in America was decreasing at a rate much faster than it was in any other nation on the planet. And yet the economy was still bad. And we would go into these diatribes about how actually it's a global economy now. And the reason why the world is struggling is because 6 corporations don't just control America, they control all of the nations. They might be able to get away with putting more stuff in our food, but fundamentally, it's the same companies in all of these nations, and they really don't have to worry about competing anymore. And then they know that they have one political party operating as the party of rainbow flags and acceptance, the other party of don't these rainbow flags and acceptance suck, and no parties of, hey, you notice how we're getting fleeced by these handful of corporations? That's the party that will win. The question is, does either party want to be that party? Third party time can't happen soon enough. How many more times can I say party before it's going to wrap? The show wraps up, we'll find out. Only have about 15 seconds. Download the WHBY app. Catch me on my Ben Cominos YouTube page. Please subscribe to that Ben Cominos YouTube page. All the videos go up, and we're starting to start putting videos that aren't just this show up there as well pretty soon. We'll be back tomorrow, guys. Thank you for watching, however you're watching or listening, and Haley's up next, Outside the Box.